Get some!
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a fantastic show prepared for you all today. In the second segment, we're gonna have a little bit of a surprise for you. You know, it's Wednesday, solo Anna hours usually happen on Wednesdays, but there's an extra little twist today that I think a lot of you will enjoy. In the second hour of the show, we will cover a story involving a Pentagon official who has been arrested and charged for crimes that he has allegedly committed. I honestly can't believe the crime that this person has been accused of, but more importantly, I can't believe how long this individual engaged in the crime that we're gonna detail for you in, again, the second hour of the show. As always, just want to encourage you all to like and share the stream. It's an easy and free way to help support TYT and the message that we put out into the world on a regular basis. You can also support the show by becoming a member by going to tyt.com/join, or just click on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Now, without further ado, I want to get to a segment that I promised you all earlier this week. It's a segment that I care deeply about, and it'll probably be a recurring segment. Many of you who watch the Young Turks regularly have probably noticed by now that I have deep disdain for the state's governor, Gavin Newsom. Now, Gavin Newsom has a long list of issues that I would love to share with you in great detail. And as a result, I'm thinking about doing a recurring segment explaining to you why it is that I have this disdain for Governor Newsom. Today, I want to focus on what I would argue is one of the most egregious actions Newsom has taken to protect private utility companies that have sparked deadly fires in this state. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will infuriate you, and it should infuriate you. While the corporate media loves to put this nice gloss on Governor Newsom, I want to tell you what he's really about. Now, nearly 5 years ago, California suffered the deadliest and most destructive fire in the state's history when Pacific Gas and Electric's 97-year-old equipment failed and sparked the Camp Fire. The blaze began on November 8th, 2018 in Northern California's Butte County. Winds rapidly drove the fire downhill through developed communities, causing the deaths of 85 people, the injuries of dozens of firefighters, and the destruction of 18,000 structures. An estimated 30,000 Californians either lost their homes or suffered severe damage. The towns of Paradise and Conco suffered the brunt of the damage, with around 95% of their communities absolutely burned to ash. And in the end, the total cost of rebuilding after the fire was more than $16 billion. But Gavin Newsom, the state's governor, helped PG&E skirt responsibility. Media have reported over and over again that the fire was sparked due to a faulty electric transmission line belonging to PG&E. But in reality, it was a nearly 100-year-old C-hook holding up the power lines that finally broke, causing active power lines to fall onto the dry forest floor. An FBI investigation found that PG&E knew that their outdated equipment was a huge risk. In fact, they simply allowed these aging hooks to remain in place until they broke, and we have evidence that they knew that this was a problem. Documents show that as far back as 1987 and as recently as 2017, PG&E commissioned reviews of the aging hooks that made it very clear that they would fall apart after 80 to 100 years of use. But PG&E did nothing about it. After all, replacing the hooks would cut into their profits. According to local ABC 10 reporter Brandon Rittemann's investigative reporting, it would have cost PG&E just $10 to replace the aging hook. For anyone who didn't follow the story closely, it appeared as though PG&E surprisingly took responsibility for sparking the fire. The power company pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. After all, it was their faulty equipment that sparked the fire in the first place. Prosecutors successfully convicted the company, but as we know, convicting a company is very different from holding individuals liable. Even so, Governor Gavin Newsom made sure that PG&E was actually rewarded for their bad behavior. As Butte County Deputy District Attorney Mark Noel declared, "I think there's a lot of enabling going on in Sacramento. The enabler in chief is none other than Governor Newsom." In 2019, as prosecutors were building their case against the utility company, PG&E filed for bankruptcy in an effort to protect their business. I mean, this is common with a lot of corporations. They'll usually file for bankruptcy in order to protect their resources, to protect their money, protect their business. But that same month, Newsom took office and declared that, quote, "We gotta give PG&E a chance." But here's the thing, the utility company had already been given many chances and was even on federal probation for its role in the San Bruno gas explosion, which killed 8 people. But Newsom took bribes from PG&E in the form of campaign donations when he first ran for governor in 2018. Despite PG&E's status as a convicted felon, Newsom had no problem taking their money. In July of 2019, the governor was asked by reporters how he could be trusted to hold PG&E accountable, considering the utility company spent more than $208,000 to get Newsom elected. His answer was telling, quote, "I wish you luck with whatever you're working on, but that's a strange question." A strange question? How the hell is that a strange question, you corrupt sack of crap? Now, in July of 2019, Newsom was asked whether he would return the money to PG&E, considering the company's criminality and the lives lost as a result of it. Newsom responded, "No. If the suggestion is that somehow contributions have changed actions, look what I just passed." What Newsom was referring to was legislation that made it look like safety measures were going to be put in place to prevent these private utilities from causing all this pain and destruction. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Once in office, Newsom hired private attorneys from O'Melveny and Myers to write a bill called AB 1054. Sure, laws are thought to be written by elected lawmakers, but not in this case. Using taxpayer money, Newsom awarded the firm a whopping $9.6 million to assist him with PG&E's bankruptcy. Publicly, Newsom spoke glowingly about the law firm, but he did not disclose that O'Melveny and Myers worked on behalf of PG&E for at least 2 decades, and as recently as 2017, the year before the Camp Fire. Documents show that as the bill was being drafted, Newsom held meetings with PG&E executives. On June 18th, 2019, Newsom met with PG&E CEO Bill Johnson, Senior VP John Simon, CFO Jason Wells, and more. Newsom would go on to sign the legislation that O'Melveny and Myers, private attorneys, wrote into law. And it's pretty clear that the legislation was crafted specifically to provide financial protections for PG&E and its shareholders. AB 1054 created new safety certificates that utility companies could apply for. That safety certificate allows PG&E, along with the 2 other investor-owned utility companies in the state, to tap into a $21 billion state insurance fund that is half paid for by the utilities and half paid for by customers through a surcharge on power bills. In other words, if the company is granted the certification, it protects shareholders from having to pay for any damages that their company caused and instead have the state insurance fund pay out the damages. Unsurprisingly, PG&E applied right away for these safety certificates and was soon granted its first certification. There was absolutely no indication that they had improved or upgraded its century-old equipment. They were granted the certificate because they had a plan to be safe. But that so-called plan never came to fruition. They never cut down the trees they were supposed to cut down. They never went on to inspect the hooks suspending power lines or any of their aging equipment. But the safety certificate was a game changer. Not for the residents of California, of course. Not for PG&E's victims who were yet to be paid in damages, but for PG&E specifically. Before the governor's bill, power companies couldn't bill the cost of wildfire damage to their customers unless they proved they acted prudently or reasonably. The governor's bill changed the rules. It automatically deems a power company reasonable if it has a safety certificate. More than that, even if someone manages to prove the utility was unreasonable in causing a fire, the governor's bill capped how much it could hurt the shareholders' profits. Are you guys getting the idea of who Gavin Newsom really is? I really want you to take this in. Because again, my hatred for him didn't just come out of nowhere. He is absolute sleazy trash. And guess what? Just 2 months after PG&E received their first safety certification, PG&E's transmission lines sparked the Kincaid fire in October of 2019. Cal Fire's investigation found the utility company at fault. Every fire season, state investigators pointed fingers at PG&E's recklessness and how their unwillingness to update their equipment has led to more wildfires. Yet every year, they're awarded new safety certificates. PG&E went on to face 4 new manslaughter charges for the 2020 Zog fire. The utility company also sparked the massive Dixie fire in 2021. PG&E's safety certificate was renewed just 1 month later. 1 month later. PG&E has been able to skirt upgrading its faulty equipment with the help of LaFonza Butler, the very woman Newsom just handpicked to fill Dianne Feinstein's Senate seat. Butler worked as a consultant at SCRB Strategies, a consulting firm that has managed Gavin Newsom's political campaigns. PG&E retained SCRB Strategies at a time when the utility firm was battling state regulators over upgrades necessary to prevent wildfires and the fallout over a gas explosion that killed 8 and injured 58 residents in San Bruno, California. The company paid Butler's firm $1.1 million, records show. Butler is now one of the most powerful people in America because Newsom gifted her a Senate seat that she never had to run for. She's never held elected office, but clearly she's a seasoned vet in doing what our politicians do best, taking money from corporate interests and awarding them profits and protection in return. But let's get back to the safety certificates. Who grants them, and why is PG&E able to renew its certification year after year despite all of these devastating disasters? The California Public Utilities Commission, or CPU, signs off on the certificates. The commission is appointed by Gavin Newsom. And former members of the commission allege that Newsom micromanages and pressures them to sign off on the certificates. But I'm not done yet. You guys remember this controversy?
You were telling everyone they couldn't go inside restaurants.
Right.
But you did it and you got caught at French Laundry.
Probably should have gone to the French Laundry.
No, it was a dumb mistake. It was a terrible mistake. It wasn't illegal, it was wrong. And I totally violated the spirit of what I was preaching. And it was wrong, and I own that. I own that. And you know what? For the grace of God, no one else has ever made a mistake. I guess I did. I own that.
Okay, everybody makes mistakes. However, that was a dumb one.
But it was dumb. And I own it.
Wow, 2 scumbags in one shot. I mean, can anyone really handle all that? Everyone was so focused on the fact that Newsom was caught dining with lobbyists at a swanky Napa Valley restaurant without a mask during the pandemic. But who he was dining with was a far more interesting story. The gathering was actually a birthday dinner for Jason Kinney. Who's Jason Kinney? Well, it's one of Newsom's close friends of 20 years. According to ABC 10, in the months before the dinner party, bankruptcy court documents show hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from PG&E's checkbook to Axiom Advisors, the lobbying firm owned by Jason Kinney. Kinney's name shows up on the firm's billable hours working for some of PG&E's biggest unsecured creditors. Under services rendered on the bill, the first things you'll see are the passage of AB 1054 and the approval by Governor Gavin Newsom of PG&E's bankruptcy plan. More on that disgusting excuse for a bankruptcy plan in just a minute. Now, Axiom reported working with the governor's office to see all of it through. PG&E's bankruptcy delivered for Kinney's clients. The plan paid them cash in full plus interest. But many of the actual victims of the Camp Fire have yet to receive any restitution from PG&E. Almost 5 years after the fire, Paradise residents are still camping where their houses once stood. The Fire Victim Trust Fund that was set up following PG&E's bankruptcy was supposed to receive $13.5 billion from PG&E, but the utility company only paid half of that in cash. The other half was supposed to be paid as shares in PG&E stock. Almost a year after the power company exited bankruptcy, the value of those shares tanked, likely due to the, yearly wildfires their company sparks. The shares that were initially valued at $6.75 billion were soon worth just $4.8 billion, which robbed the fire victims of nearly $2 billion. And that was before the 2021 fire season and before the Dixie Fire. In other words, due to the company's continued negligence, the value of the shares paid to the victims' trust kept tanking. And just think about how sick this whole situation is. The structure of the bankruptcy agreement places the victims in this horrible position of having to root for the success of the very company that destroyed their lives. They're left with no choice because they need resources to rebuild their lives. But the stock was never even worth the amount the victims were told they were when the bankruptcy plan was voted on. From the day PG&E exited bankruptcy, victims needed the stock price to go up another 56% to be made whole. And the retired Judge John Trotter, overseeing the trust fund, told the victims, and I quote, "It's important for you to want PG&E to do well." That guy gets paid $1,500 an hour from the victim settlement to manage their money. So again, if you're curious why I hold such deep disdain for Governor Newsom, understand that it doesn't come from thin air. I'm not making things up. I'm a Californian. I've been a Californian all my life. The leadership that we see in this state is not only abysmal, it's corrupt. And when it comes to Newsom, just flat out evil. We're talking about a private utility company that pleaded guilty to manslaughter. And what does Gavin Newsom do? He swoops right in and works hard to ensure that he provides cover and protection for them so they are preemptively cleared of any wrongdoing. Thanks to these so-called safety certifications that he pressures, these appointed individuals to sign off on. And this is just one story. There's so much more to get to. The fact that he vetoed a bill that would offer unemployment benefits to striking workers. The fact that he shut down 2 state prisons without any plan on what would happen to them next. The fact that that then led to our county prisons being so crowded that they had no choice but to release all sorts of violent offenders into the public. There's so much to get to when it comes to Governor Gavin Newsom. And for the Democratic establishment propping him up for a presidential run, I'd be careful. Because if there's anything I care about, if there's anything that I want to accomplish more than anything, it's to ensure that the general public knows who Gavin Newsom really is. He's absolute scum, he is evil, and he does not value human lives when his own political career and his own corruption is on the line. That's who Governor Gavin Newsom is. So the next time he wants to point fingers at other governors like the Republican governor of Florida, maybe he should look inward because he's no better. In fact, when it comes to what he did in protecting these private utility companies, I would argue he might be worse. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
They knew and they let it happen.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual respect and conversation with one another. And as I said earlier, I mean, not only do I feel that through the work I do, I'm informing our audience, but they inform me oftentimes as well. You know, they'll pitch stories to us. They'll tell us, you know, a certain perspective or angle to a story that we might have missed. And I love it.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. Reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for them to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you going to afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources?
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It's not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
I can't wait to have your sexual anarchy in my mouth.
Can't wait.
Kasparian with you, but I'm not the only one here. Joining us is Wosny Lambre in the flesh.
In the flesh. Every now and again, you make a mistake, Anna, and it works out. In this case, I'm gonna be on the show for 2 hours instead of 1.5.
Right, so the plan was to have Waz join us for the second hour, but he didn't realize that it was only for the second hour bonus episode, so he came in early. Why not make the best of that situation?
Sorry, Judy.
All right, so we got a lot of news to get to, but I just want to read some of the feedback from my Newsom segment. So a lot of you loved it. I want to read from Monkey Tang in our members section who says, Anna nails his ass to the wall. I love it. Newsom sucks and no one reports on it. If anyone needs to wonder what his decision-making process is like, just make sure they know he was married to Guilfoyle. Kimberly Guilfoyle, yes. That should be enough to disqualify his judgment for life. Look, I think that is a part of his history that should make one question, but honestly, there's a long list of issues with Newsom, and that's at the very bottom, believe it or not. So I'm very likely gonna do that recurring segment. We'll see how it plays out, but thank you for your feedback. And also thank you to Cerebrus Dragon who says, hey TYT fam, Anna wearing red today, which means the show is about to be epic. Love seeing you in your red salt queen, let's go. Definitely salty, but you know what, maybe today, some of these Supreme Court justices are saltier than I am. Because we've got a story involving this case that could absolutely decimate the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But even conservative Supreme Court justices are skeptical of those trying to dismantle it. So let's get to that story. A group of payday lenders began arguing to the Supreme Court yesterday that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, really one of the few government agencies that gives a crap about us and ensures that we get our money back when we're victims of fraud, is unconstitutional. They essentially want to dismantle it, probably because the CFPB likes to hold payday lenders accountable. Now, they're threatening the existence of this government watchdog that regulates the financial industry. And the case seeks to eviscerate the CFPB and void all of its regulatory decisions. But so far, things aren't going so well for the payday lenders who have brought this case to the Supreme Court, because even with the 6 conservative Supreme Court justices, many of them are real skeptical of the arguments they're making. Now, let's back up a little. Let's learn about what the CFPB does. Since 2010, the CFPB has been charged with basically protecting consumers from predatory financial practices. Just to give you an idea of how successful they've been, since then it has won about $17.5 billion in restitution on behalf of ordinary Americans, and has taken steps to cancel debts for some 200 million eligible Americans. They're putting in work, and they're putting in work on our behalf. We should want to protect this agency. Now, payday lenders who reaped enormous profits from people who need a long or a short-term loan don't like this. They don't like the CFPB, they don't like these regulations, they don't like to be held accountable. Prior to the enactment of CFPB regulations, payday lenders were routinely rolling over the amount due and tacking on fees as often as twice a day, so that borrowers ended up owing thousands of dollars on small loans of $500 or less. Now, when the CFPB came in, they changed all that. In Community Financial Services Association of America, VCFPB, payday lenders zeroed in on the agency's funding mechanism as their argument to dismantle this agency. They wanted to essentially invalidate the agency's rulings that negatively impact the profits of these payday lenders and the predatory practices of these payday lenders. The case is coming before the Supreme Court following a 5th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling that the agency's funding is unconstitutional and all of its regulatory actions are void. Now, if SCOTUS confirms that decision, it would not only overturn the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's laws, but it could also cause a lot of havoc in the financial system, disrupting mortgage and auto loans, just as an example. Now, here's the background you need to know about this case. When Congress created the CFPB, it placed it within the Federal Reserve and stated that it could draw funds of up to $600 million, subject to adjustments for inflation, from the Federal Reserve Treasury, which is raised from payments made by regional reserve banks. In this week's case, the Payday lenders argue that Congress's decision to fund the agency with non-annual appropriations raised by the Federal Reserve was unconstitutional under the Constitution's Appropriations Clause and violated the separation of powers. But see, the problem is that the argument flies in the face of, well, a lot of things, including history of funding agencies in a similar way, the text of the Constitution's Appropriations Clause, and also, that pesky little thing called court precedent from the past. Now, the Appropriations Clause does not state that Congress must only fund agencies through annual appropriations or with the funding capped at specific levels. The Biden administration argues that the Appropriations Clause in the Constitution was not meant to straitjacket Congress in how it sets up funding. The clause says that no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. In this case, the government argues Congress enacted a law that funds the agency by providing up to a capped amount each year from the combined fees earned by the Federal Reserve System. At America's founding, Congress created agencies like the Customs Service, the Post Office, and revenue offices, or officers, I should say. And those were all funded through non-annual standing appropriations in a similar way as the CFPB has been funded. Now, Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, representing the agency, argued in its defense, saying that the CFPB appropriations fits squarely within this unbroken line of congressional practice. Noel Francisco, the former Solicitor General under President Donald Trump, of course, and the lawyer for the Payday lenders, disagreed. What is he saying? Well, he claims that the Appropriations Clause contains a hidden requirement that Congress not delegate authority related to funding to the executive branch, which would be a violation of the separation of powers doctrine. The supposed requirement would prohibit Congress providing perpetual funding to an executive branch agency of a non-fixed amount. But as the three liberal justices noted, and even conservative justices like Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett noted, the Appropriations Clause contains absolutely no hidden language regarding the separation of powers. In fact, here's Justice Sonia Sotomayor trying to make the case trying to make sense, I should say, of Noel Francisco's argument.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand your argument and I'm a total loss.
I'll try to do that.
Okay, I think I understand it the way Justice Kagan does, but you're telling me it's something different. From the very beginning, Congress gave sometimes a lump sum and said to an agency, you can spend this amount, but didn't do a line by line on what or how much, and the agency would decide how much of that sum it needed. Over 60% of the appropriations, I think it may be 73, 63, something like that, are of standing appropriations. They're not given every year. And some of them are fixed and some of them are not. So I don't understand what you're saying.
Because it's a dumb argument. That's why you're not understanding what he's saying, Justice Sotomayor. Now, Kagan, meanwhile, pointed out that the argument that the Appropriations Clause limits Congress's authorization of standing appropriations would actually impact many other existing and quite important federal agencies. Let me read you her quotes. It sure seems that, in your view, the Federal Reserve would also be unconstitutional. You're flying in the face of 250 years of history. Now look, we expected the liberal justices to shred the argument by the lawyers representing the Payday lenders. But I have to be honest, what I was personally surprised by is that even conservative justices like Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett don't seem to be buying these ridiculous arguments either. So in her questioning, Barrett made it clear that she was unable to square Francisco's argument with the text of the Constitution. We're all struggling to figure out what's the standard that you would use. There's nothing in the appropriations clause that imposes the limits you're talking about. And then Justice Brett Kavanaugh even challenged the trade group's claims that the Bureau's funding stream exists in perpetuity. Let's watch.
What do you, the word perpetual I'm having trouble with because it implies that it's entrenched and that a future Congress couldn't change it. But Congress could change it tomorrow. And there's nothing perpetual or permanent or about this.
So I think it's entrenched, Your Honor, in the sense that I think maybe the Chief Justice was referring to. Once Congress gives it over to the executive and expands executive power, you've now given a co-equal branch of government a large amount of your power, and you need to claw it back. You can't claw it back through an ordinary law. You can only claw it back through either convincing the president himself to give up presidential power, something you've given to him, which is tough to do, or you've got to override a presidential veto.
If a group of a member or House of Congress tomorrow, if a majority of a House of Congress said we're not going to fund pick your agency unless we change the CFPB funding structure, they could do that. The word perpetual or forever or permanent, I think, is a little strong here.
Indeed. So we don't know how the justices are going to rule on this issue. But dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau would be absolutely disastrous for ordinary Americans who have been preyed upon by financial institutions. In fact, I just want to read you a quick quote from a professor of law at the University of California, Irvine. The word pandemonium comes to mind in regard to dismantling the CFPB. I want you to jump in on this. I know that was a long explanation and a lot of context in regard to what's happening right now. But in the politics that we're constantly dealing with, right? The corruption that we're constantly dealing with, this agency was a little ray of light.
Yeah, I mean, people got to remember what the inception of this agency was born out of the 2008 financial crisis, where there were many predatory practices by the largest financial institutions in the country, right? And even the Republicans agreed that some of this stuff needed to be reined in, and they needed an enforcement sort of branch within the government to rein these guys in. And again, some of the most predatory practices. What I find hilarious about this payday loan scam is that they don't even want to defend their practices on the merits.
No, they don't.
They're trying to dismantle the CFPB on essentially a technicality.
Totally.
They're not up there saying like, oh, the way that we lend some of our most vulnerable citizens money on a same day basis with incredible interest, incredibly draconian sort of fees on these loans. They're not defending that practice because again, we have a system of loaning money to people. Most people have decided that it's a fair way to try to make money. You loan people at some type of interest, they pay you back along the way, you get more for the money that you lend and you loaned out. A lot of people say that's a legitimate business. We already have that in place. This is something completely separate from that, and it specifically targets the most desperate people in our society.
Absolutely. So look, let me just say, if you have a credit card or credit cards, read the terms and conditions and read what the interest rate is. Chances are the interest rate on your typical credit card is about 24%, okay? That is a lot in interest. Payday lenders take that and laugh, like 24%. I mean, their practices are so predatory and they do prey on the most desperate individuals that it's nearly impossible for them to ever pay back those small loans. The interest is much higher, and there have been some regulations to kind of rein that in, and those are the very regulations passed down by the CFPB that these payday lenders want to do away with. And you're so right, it's such a good point. they're not doing like a PR blitz defending their business practices because their business practices are indefensible. Instead, they're using the judicial system and they're working hard behind the scenes to dismantle the only real protection ordinary Americans received following the 2008 economic collapse. In fact, this was the brainchild of Senator Elizabeth Warren. She really had to pressure Barack Obama to implement the CFPB, and I'm glad that she did. Because when you look at his response to the economic collapse, it was so abysmal. I really do think that it paved the way for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know where I stand on that as an idea. Again, I think people can go out, they can look up some of the cases that the CFPB has won. Wells Fargo being one of the biggest. I mean, these guys are some of the most crooked of all of them. And again, they go in, they audit these folks, and they actually hand down actual penalties. They claw back money for actual normal people. I think what people need to understand too, when we see elite institutions or elites being reprimanded ever, it's only when they commit crimes against other elites, right? For instance, what's happening with Donald Trump in January 6th is like, no, you tried to take the election away from the Democrats, another elite institution. We got to come down on you.
Yeah.
Same thing with Watergate. Same thing, like you can't commit crimes on other elites. This is one of the few institutions where elite institutions get in trouble for doing these types of things to ordinary people. It just doesn't happen. You can rarely, if ever, get restitution when an elite institution trespasses against you.
1000%. So we're gonna follow this case. I'm hoping that what we heard from the conservative justices is a sign that they are likely going to rule against the payday lenders. There have been some surprising rulings by the conservative Supreme Court in recent months. So we'll see what happens, but it is important, I believe, to protect the CFPB, and I really do hope that SCOTUS has the best interests of the general public in mind when they pass down their ruling. With that said, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we'll give you an update on the whole House Speaker debacle, the idea of Donald Trump serving as an interim speaker. We've got all of that and more coming up, don't miss it.
After a workout, have some beers.
Welcome to our social break. Stinky Feet writes in and says, make Rudy the speaker so he can sweat hair dye all over Congress. Ugh. He's so gross. Monkey Tank says, such a good breakdown, Anna. I hope this goes viral. That's in regard to the segment I did on Gavin Newsom and how he has provided cover for the criminal acts of PG&E. Look, honestly, the last time we covered that story, although it wasn't as in-depth, it did not perform well. So if you want it to go viral, please share that video far and wide. It can really, really help. And I think it's important for people, as Waz likes to say, the normies who don't live in California to understand what Gavin Newsom really is and what he's about. Jay from New Jersey, who's been a member for 2 months, says, enjoying TYT with some apple cinnamon donuts. I remember on Jacobin, you did a report on prison labor being used as firefighters. Were those fires caused by PG&E negligence? Some of them, yes, yeah. And by the way, those prisoners, they're like on the front lines fighting those fires. And then once they're out of prison, they are not allowed to become professional firefighters because they're convicted felons. Just let that sink in for a second. Think about how sick that is. This state has a lot of problems. It really does. Frank Rockefeller, who is our resident conservative viewer, says Newsom is a narcissist. Agreed. He is exempt from offering reality-based value. Perfect politician. You know what, Frank? I like that comment a lot. And I like it when we agree. This is great. Me being me, 24, has a comment that I don't quite understand, but I'm gonna read it anyway. Thank you for your super chat. These two give bad jokes and takes. It could be a reference to me and Cenk. I have no idea. The comment came in before you joined us, Waz.
I mean, it still applies.
No, I think you do good jokes. All right, we've got a minute left, great. So let's go to our members. Thank you to our new members, including the names Bogdo, 305 Cells, 305, I'm hoping Miami, that's where my husband's from, and Arthur Grupp, thank you so much for being members. Titan writes in and says, concerning colleges, you guys are missing most on right. Don't want exchange of ideas. They are impervious to facts, just want to push distorted narrative. Well, look, I think you're right about that, but right now our academic institutions are dominated by liberal ideology, which makes it a not so friendly place for conservative ideology. But make no mistake.
But also not a friendly place for leftist ideology. Like any radical professors in the academy, they get ran up out of there too, trust me. It's literally just the libs.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's a really, really good point. And so, look, the point I'm trying to make is your comment is correct. It's just that the power imbalance does exist. And as a result of that power imbalance, conservatives and yes, leftists who want economic changes do get shut out. Mike writes in and says, of Payday lenders, I knew someone who borrowed $150, paid back $400 and still owed half the principal.
Jeez.
So that's how predatory these payday lenders are. It's just totally disgusting. Anyway, speaking of disgusting, let's get into this.
McCarthy will not seek the speakership again. Now, sources telling me at this hour, some House Republicans have been in contact with and have started an effort to draft former President Donald Trump to be the next speaker. And I have been told that President Trump might be open to helping the Republican Party, at least in the short term, if necessary.
Just absolute clown show this country has become. I should say our politicians have become. Now that Kevin McCarthy has been ousted from his speakership role, far-right House Republicans are calling on Trump to serve as the interim speaker. Now, what does Trump think about that? Reporters caught up with him on the third day of his financial fraud civil trial, and here's what he had to say.
A lot of people have been calling me about speaker. All I can say is we'll do whatever's best for the country and for the Republican Party. Would you take a job? We have some great people. Would you take a job? A lot of people have asked me about it. I'm focused. You know, we're leading. I don't know you. I'm sure you don't read too much in the papers, but we're leading by like 50 points for president. You know, my focus is totally on that. If I can help them during the process, I would do it. But we have some great people in the Republican Party that could do a great job as speaker. Well, what about you? I think she's a wonderful woman.
So Trump seems open to it, although he does note that they have some great people in the Republican Party who could serve that role. What do you think, Waz?
He said it himself. I'm leading by 50 points for the presidency. Yeah. I don't want this penny ante speakership crap on my desk. I'm sure he's obviously flattered by the idea that he would, be the leader of some other branch of government for the Republicans. But it's obvious that he thinks speakership is beneath him.
He does think it's beneath him, and you're right. You look at the polling, and right now, if the election were to take place, there's a good chance that Trump could even win in the general, based on the average of polls that show Trump and Biden neck and neck, which is definitely concerning. But what about Jim Jordan, a Trump loyalist? What does he think about all this? Let's watch.
I don't know. He'd be great, but I want Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States. If he wants to be speaker,
well,
great.
He still,
but,
well,
I want him to be president of the United States.
President. He's still going to be running for president.
He's still going to run for president. He's still going to run for president. Don't worry, everybody. He's still going to run for president. Now, interestingly enough, Jim Jordan seemed to be a little upset over what happened to Kevin McCarthy. I want to go to that video now.
I thought it was unfair to Kevin. Kevin, I think, has done a fine job, and he and I came in together. He's a good man, and he didn't deserve this, in my judgment.
Will you run for speaker?
That's a decision for the conference.
Now we have word that Jim Jordan has thrown his hat, his name into the hat, or the ring, I should say, to essentially become the next Speaker of the House. Axios's Andrew Solinder caught up with Jordan on Wednesday, meaning today, who told him, yes, he will enter the running to be the next House Speaker. Jordan also said that he spoke to House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, another top candidate, who, by the way, is also in the running for this position, about the matter. And now he's investigating whether he can consolidate enough support to make it happen. And what he means by that is, will he be able to unite the so-called moderate wing of the Republican Party with the far right wing of the Republican Party? You know, those who are part of the so-called House Freedom Caucus in the House.
What a mess. I mean, this was pretty predictable once we read or we saw what the conditions for McCarthy's speakership were. When these Freedom Caucus terrorists, quite frankly, allowed him to ascend to the position. They said one person can bring up a vote to get him out of here. One congressman could do that. He neutered himself the second that he even took the job. And so what I would ask anybody who is a Republican and who cares about this, who is the person, short of Donald Trump, literally, who would be allowed to do this job?
No,
I don't think that person even exists for real.
That's a great point. So Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, gave a word of advice to House Republicans. He argued, listen, whoever the next speaker ends up being, they need to ensure that they do away with that ability for one member of the party to file a motion to remove the speaker. And remember, before McCarthy agreed and agreed to that concession, basically what needed to happen is that the party, the majority of the party, had to vote to even bring up another vote where they can decide, through a House vote, including everyone, whether or not this individual should be voted out of the speakership role. So McConnell's like, look, word of advice, why don't we go back to the old system? Because this is just gonna keep happening over and over again. Look, for my purposes, I don't care about any of this. And the reason why I don't care about any of this is because it's not even gonna matter who the House Speaker is. It is very clear to me that the relationship between the Democrats and Republicans it was already incredibly toxic, unworkable, untenable. They have less interest in actually delivering for the American people than engaging in their ridiculous catfights. But now there's fracturing even among the Republicans in the House. So look, this is just a way of saying they're not interested in doing anything for you. That should be concerning. It shows how broken Congress is. But whether it's freaking Jim Jordan or Kevin McCarthy, they're gonna look out for their donors. Even though Matt Gaetz, I just love this, Matt Gaetz loves the idea of Jim Jordan running for this position, right? So he supported him, saying, my mentor Jim Jordan would be great. Now, Matt Gaetz is also the same guy who pretends to be very concerned about corruption among our politicians. Interesting. Okay, but Jim Jordan's different, I guess. So if you've forgotten who Jim Jordan is, let us remind you of why this man really has no business being Speaker of the House or a representative of any district in this country. So Richard Strauss, the former doctor for the Ohio State wrestling team, was accused of sexually abusing at least 177 male student patients between 1979 and 1998. Now you might be wondering, okay, why are you bringing that up in the context of this speakership story involving Jim Jordan? Well, because one wrestler, Tito Vasquez, says he still remembers the day 3 decades ago when the doctor he'd gone to see about a bloody nose insisted on examining his genitals. Now, he, along with several other wrestlers, had basically told Jim Jordan about it when he was the assistant coach, and Jim Jordan did nothing about it. In fact, it seems like he provided cover for this behavior. Vasquez also recalls how one of his coaches dismissed his immediate complaint. "I have nothing to do with this," Vasquez quoted the assistant coach saying, as he effectively ended the conversation and went on with wrestling practice. The coach, Vasquez says, was Jim Jordan. Jordan has, of course, emphatically denied these allegations. He says that he knew nothing about Strauss's abuse during his own years working at Ohio State University between 1987 and 1995. His campaign turned to PR company Shirley and Bannister Public Affairs, which distributed statements on the matter and set up a website presenting support for Jordan. Jordan's campaign paid the firm about $95,000 in 2018, according to campaign finance records. But 6 former OSU wrestlers said that they were actually present when Jordan heard or responded to sexual misconduct complaints about Strauss. 8 others say Strauss's inappropriate behavior was an open secret in the athletic department and that Jordan, among others, must have known about it. In fact, here are the accounts of other OSU wrestlers.
Former OSU wrestler Dunyasha Yates says Jordan is one of the coaches who knew because he told him. In January of 1993, Yates went to see Strauss for a thumb sprain and the doctor tried to pull down his pants. Yates says he kicked open the doctor's door to escape. Jordan was right outside next to an ice machine.
He jumped up like, "What's going on?" I said, "Coach, he just tried to give me a physical exam for my thumb injury. Look, it looks like a baseball. It's swelled up." And he was like, "Man, if he ever tried that, I would kill him."
Jordan supporters say Yates can't be trusted because of a past conviction for fraud. But 2 other wrestlers told CNN they witnessed the encounter.
I do recall somebody bringing up something to one of the assistant coaches, and his response was simply, "Well, if you ever tried that with me, I'd snap his neck like a stick of dry balsa wood."
And I remember the exact phrase about, if that happened to me, I'd break his neck.
The coach who talked about breaking Strauss's neck was Jim Jordan, according to both Richie and Flushy.
Richie also said this: "When we heard Jim say he wasn't aware, everyone just thought, are you kidding? I like Jimmy, but I think he took the wrong stance off the get-go, and now he can't backtrack." And former OSU wrestler Adam DiSabato told Ohio State legislators that Jordan called him in 2018, okay, basically asking him to provide a counter narrative to testimony that his own brother gave in regard to the sexual abuse that Jim Jordan knew about. He's quoted as saying, "Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling on the 4th of July, begging me to go against my brother, begging me, crying for a half hour. That's the kind of cover-ups that's going on here or there." So that's who Jim Jordan is. And that is who Matt Gaetz is propping up, which kind of makes sense considering some of the allegations against Matt Gaetz himself. But any final thoughts on this?
I mean, I can't be surprised that Jim Jordan would stick his neck out in service of covering his own hide instead of being brave. I don't think anybody should be surprised by that revelation. But yeah, his politics are obviously horrible. So obviously for those reasons alone, I don't think the guy should have sent to the speakership. But yeah, a guy with a past like that, honestly, it aligns with some of the things that these guys want nowadays in the GOP. It's kind of sad to see this go, and people wonder how we could have a way forward. It would take some bravery on this part of the people who aren't the crazies to relinquish power. And we've seen on both sides, might I add, that the idea that you would relinquish power for the betterment of the country and the party so that they could probably start from scratch with trying to build an actual political party rather than what we have now, which if you read some of the statements, they're like, the next speaker needs to investigate Hunter Biden and put impeachment of Joe Biden on it. These are the stakes.
I know,
Anna.
I know. That's why, look, this is the reason why it's hard for me to be at all invested in who the Republican Speaker of the House is gonna be, because the party actually is united on one thing, and it's to essentially deflect and distract from, how they aid and abet corporate interests, how they push for tax cuts for the richest and corporations in the country. They want to deflect from all of that. They want to deflect from the fact that they're bought and sold. And so they just focus on the investigations. That is what they're united on. The next House Speaker, whoever the Republican ends up being, is not gonna fight for you, is not gonna work hard to ensure that we're passing laws that protect ordinary Americans. They're just gonna focus on nonsense that wastes more taxpayer money on nonsense investigations. I mean, they brought forth an impeachment inquiry into Biden without any evidence of wrongdoing. That is what they're about, and that is what they will continue to do, period. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, I will be updating a story that we did on the so-called Victoria's Secret Karen back in 2021. There's some new details to that story, and I think it's important for you all to know about it. And then later in the show, we will talk a little bit about, how Americans feel about Democrats versus Republicans in their handling of the economy. And then we'll also talk about a Pentagon official who has been arrested for his decades-long involvement in dogfighting. That and more coming up, don't miss it.
Ice cream.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that that want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion. You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. Right? You have to do corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
If you don't like your kids that much, or if you don't like them at all, which happens on occasion, don't leave them a thing. The tax won't help you. Don't worry about it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Wosny Lambre here, whose work you should absolutely support. He's not only a podcast host for the show Woke Bros, but he has a lot of other things going on. So Woz, where can people find your work?
Yeah, check us out at theringer.com. We do a lot of sports related coverage. So if you're into the football season, both college and professional right now, you should be checking out our coverage. And if you have any interest in the NBA, which is my concentration, NBA is rearing back up right now. So yeah, check us out at theringer.com and the Ringer Podcast Network.
Where should I be placing my sports bets? Don't answer that, I'm kidding.
Okay, I'm about to give you some bets now.
But maybe let's talk off here.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, well, let's get to some more news, including an update to a story we did back in 2021 that I now have some regrets in how we covered it. And I think it's important to do these updates and give people the full story because we're now learning some new details. New details have emerged that severely complicate the story of the so-called Victoria's Secret Karen, who went viral following a verbal altercation with a black woman back in 2021. Here's what I mean.
Oh God, no, excuse, now you are, oh my God. Girl, I never thought nothing like this would happen to me. She just tried to run and hit me. Don't record. Don't.
Now, here are some of the basic details of what happened. So, Jemoma Ukenta is the woman who was recording it, right? So, she says that everything began when she was scanning the store's offering of underwear, and the woman, Abigail Elphick, started browsing items uncomfortably close to her. Ukenta says that she asked her to back up, but that Elphick instead went to the cash register and told an employee that Ukenta had just threatened her. Now, keep in mind that the interaction happened during the peak of the coronavirus pandemic in 2021, when social distancing measures were in fact in place. It's understandable for someone to want an individual standing too close to them to kind of back off a little bit. Now, Ukenta says that she decided to start recording the scene on video, which she says led to the confrontation that you saw on video, right? Now, Elphick asked multiple times for the recording to stop, which continued to escalate the situation. Now, after the initial scuffle, Elphick appears to chase Ukenta around the store while alleging that she threatened her. Then Elphick calls the police on her. Eventually, both the mall security guards and the police arrive, and Elphick appears to leave the mall. Now, in the reporting that came out back in 2021, here's what was said, here's what we knew, and then I'm gonna give you the updates, which I think are just as relevant. In what Ukenta says is the police report, Elphick said that what she did was wrong and that she experienced a panic attack after realizing Ukenta was recording her. She also said she had an anxiety disorder and was anxious about Ukenta recording her because she was afraid of losing her job and apartment. Okay, now in our previous reporting on this story, we agreed with that sentiment half-heartedly, basically saying that the reason for the anxiety attack was linked to the fact that she was being recorded. In fact, here is a snippet of how we covered it.
Look, to the heart of it, this is like, it's uncomfortable watching it.
Yeah.
So now she's having a full-scale breakdown. Fake or otherwise, it's just uncomfortable to look at. This country's a mess, and then I think part of the reason she's having the breakdown is there's a silver lining here, which is that the message is getting through. In the old days, you used to be able to push people around if they were minorities, etc., and get away with it. But now you can't because we all have phones. We put it on. People don't like it, and so. The crying isn't about what she did in the first place. The crying is about getting caught.
So that's not quite right, according to new information and new details that have come out. Now, the reason why we have new details is because Ukenta has decided to file a lawsuit against Elphick, against the mall, against the security, because she felt that they were negligent and that they didn't come to her aid quickly enough. But through these lawsuits, there's a discovery process, and through that discovery process, you learn more information about both parties involved. And after learning more information about the story, obviously it complicates the narrative, and it also makes me feel like a terrible person for just taking a viral video and reporting on it as if it was already adjudicated that Elphick was some terrible racist who did something terribly wrong. In reality, Elphick, 27, lives in a complex reserved for residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Her behavior stemmed not from a race-based problem, according to a complaint filed by her lawyers, but from fear that being filmed would lead to the loss of her apartment and job. Now look, living with developmental delays or mental health disorders in America is terrifying, and it's especially terrifying if you were able to secure some housing and a job, and that could all be threatened by someone filming you and putting that video out on the internet. So with that context, the freak out makes a little more sense. Now, it's unclear of Elphick's exact diagnosis, but according to a copy of the Bergen United Ways Rental Association, physical crime, felony or misdemeanor against a person or persons and or their property could disqualify them from their housing. Luckily, Tom Toronto, the president of the Counties United Way, which runs the residential complex where Elphick lives, called the video's aftermath a total loss of perspective and proportion. He said this: she has a disorder, she has anxiety, she had a meltdown. Then the world we live in took over and it became something entirely different than what it actually was. Because of the way that she was depicted, people did in fact try to get her fired, and they even threatened her life. As images of Elphick ricocheted around the world, an online commenter urged fellow viewers to contact a school district where Elphick had had an internship to demand that their racist employee be fired. She began getting harassing calls, and as recently as April, contacted the police to report that a man who referred to the Victoria's Secret video had called her and threatened to rape and kill her, court records show. Look, I don't know how you all feel about the updated details. I can only share how I feel about it. And I feel like a piece of trash, honestly, because I didn't even consider that maybe she has any mental health issues, or we just didn't know the full context. And we jumped on a story that was going viral, that was getting a lot of attention. And I just feel a lot of remorse for doing some, not all, but some of these stories that demonize people without knowing the full details and possibly ruin their lives. And you forget sometimes that this job carries with it a lot of responsibility, because there's a lot of power involved in either improving people's lives or destroying people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for the position you guys took back in 2021, considering what the climate was around, we were just coming off of 2020, which obviously was our great racial reckoning, summer and fall, and just this idea that some measure of justice that was oftentimes racialized could be enacted upon somebody, anybody, felt cathartic for a lot of people. And so, and myself included, I don't act like I'm above this. I completely understand that. I think now that we're sort of out of the slight hysteria of 2020 in a lot of ways, I think we can take stock of situations for what they are. We can't compare a cop shooting a guy in the back as an agent of the state and Capitol to some lady losing her nerve in the park and being mean to a random black guy. Like, those two entities are not equal. I think we need to be a little bit more, I want to say, empathetic towards private citizens, even when they make bad mistakes, even when those mistakes are racial in their, messed upness, to make up a word right there. I'm just of the opinion, and I've been of this opinion for a while now, that a private citizen shouldn't lose their way of feeding themselves, clothing themselves, and living in a home because they had a bad day at Victoria's Secret. Or the park example sticks out in my mind because it was just that was kind of when things clicked for me, where it was like, this guy might be being a little bit too precious here about his dog.
You're referring to the Amy Cooper story.
Yes.
Right? So I don't think I've ever talked about the updates on that story on this show. I've talked about it on a podcast, which got me into a lot of trouble, even though everything I was spitting were straight facts. But it's true. But yeah, the Amy Cooper story, that story, like the way it was reported, specifically specifically omitted really important context, right? And so, yeah, go ahead. What did you want to say about that?
No, what I wanted to say was that, I kind of looked back at it from the original and then getting a little bit more context about it and being like, yo, this dude might have been being a little bit too precious about his dog. And he's there are times, I'm not saying this young woman from Victoria's Secret is one of those people, whereas people might weaponize the sort of racial climate in our society to their benefit. And those people might happen to be minorities, right? I know we're not in the great awakening anymore, but Menendez tried to come out and say they can't handle a spicy Latino? Cuban, spicy Latino.
Yeah, and he's referring to Senator Bob Menendez, who's now facing more corruption charges in a separate corruption case. In 2015, he was facing corruption charges that they later dropped, mostly because there was a hung jury in that case.
And again, I'm not saying that we need to, look suspiciously upon anybody of color who says that, they experienced a messed up situation and there was a racialized component to it. I just think we feel so powerless in our society to make changes to anything. We collectively understand that there has been a collectivized racial wronging of several different types of people, whether they be indigenous, black people, brown people in this country. And a lot of times we feel like we want to right those wrongs in one fellow swoop. I would just encourage people to understand what the Karen is doing. Again, just to reiterate, what the Karen is doing at the park, or at the, and even the Karen as a pejorative is like, we might want to move away from that.
Yeah, I definitely
But what the Karen is doing at Victoria's Secret at the park, I'm sorry, is not even related to a police officer, which oftentimes we've learned this.
Yeah.
Black officers, brown officers, white officers, what they're doing to poor, marginalized minority communities in this country, it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not related. We don't need to treat them the same way. Yeah, I kind of agree. If a guy shoots a dude in the back for no reason, he should lose his job as a police officer, 100%. But Amy from marketing, who had a bad day at the park in Williamsburg, I mean, she should get to sell,
Yeah.
Kleenex again. I don't know. Like, that's just the position that I've kind of settled on. As again, I myself have evolved on these things as they've progressed over time.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I wouldn't say I've evolved on the issue of racism.
No,
but I'm definitely a lot more skeptical of these viral videos because I'm realizing more and more that many of them do not provide the proper context to judge the actions of the bad person accurately, right? So, look, the other thing I just want to quickly mention is, you mentioned incentives. And what I am a little bit concerned about is usually after these viral videos go viral, the individual who's been wronged sets up a crowdfunding account, right? On GoFundMe or whatever, and the donations start pouring in. And so in this particular case,
almost like Black Lives Matter. No, we're not doing that today. We're not gonna do that today.
So a GoFundMe campaign Ukenta created called "Help Me Defend Myself Against Karen" generated donations of more than $104,000.
Wait, hold on. What? Wait.
Yeah.
What defense? Like physical defense, legal defense?
Well, she did file a lawsuit against the mall and Elphick. So maybe she's using the funds for that. Although when reporters asked her, "Hey, where did that money go?" she just refused to talk to them. In fact, she said some pretty funny things about basically like, oh, here we go. Here's the quote. Let's go to graphic 9. So Abigail Elphick's counterclaim accuses Ukenta of like basically exploiting this for financial gain. Ukenta has made a job out of preying on individuals from behind a keyboard, inciting hate while taking advantage of victims and the public at large for her financial gain. And then, they mentioned the GoFundMe. Ukenta has said online that she believed it was only fair that she should benefit financially from video content widely viewed on social media. Why wouldn't I want to make money off my videos if everyone else is? She wrote on X, the site formerly known as Twitter, 2 months after the incident. So if there is a financial incentive to basically, I don't know what happened prior to her filming, right? Like all we know is what both parties are alleging. But if it is widely known that after these incidents occur, the person who's been wronged can set up a GoFundMe page and collect $100,000 or more, I just think it provides the wrong incentives. You know?
Well, welcome to capitalism. And but another thing that I will say is, what I mainly want people to take away from this segment is that the idea of picking up a pitchfork to burn someone at the internet stake is a very reactionary impulse.
Agreed, yeah.
It's illiberal as all hell. It's anti-humanistic. It's anti-social. It's messed up. And I think it's a wrong-headed impulse. I'm not saying every now and again we don't have a sort of, Old Testament sort of eye for an eye kind of mentality about things. But I think most of the people who call themselves being on the left, which I would consider most of the people who are picking up those pitchforks, I think we should try to stop and think if we are actually living up to our own ideals in those moments when, we try to literally assassinate the character of some stranger on the internet and ensure that they're never able to work or do things out in our society ever again because, again, of one bad incident.
Totally agree. Well said. All right, with that said, let's take a break. And when we come back, Gallup has a new poll that does not bode well for Democrats and their performance on economic issues. Come right back.
Ice cream.
welcome back to our social break. I'm gonna do a rapid fire round of comments here, starting with, let's do Jay Jesper 82, who says, hi Anna and Waz, still stuck at home with COVID. Man, it's really going around right now. Enjoying candy I can't taste. Still can taste the salt though, Anna. Much love to you all. Thank you. Steve Pift says, I heard there's a rule that prohibits anyone who's a felon or facing a felony charge from becoming speaker. Well, I don't think Jim Jordan has ever faced a felony charge, unfortunately. So I think he is. I
think they're talking about Donald Trump.
Oh, good point.
The other.
I forgot about that. I mean, look, Donald Trump is not going to be the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, like he's got better things to do.
Unfortunately. Jay from New Jersey says, Anna, a request for Bart. Can we get a mashup of Biden saying he's going to bed and Trump responding with, can't let that happen?
I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed. Can't let that happen.
Oh my God, our politics is just one big reality show, poorly written one, you know? Yeah. Anyway, Peter Hamby says, I'm not saying that the reason MAGA wants Trump as speaker is to close in on getting POTUS, but the implication is that he's got the charges, not the convictions, to keep the gavel away. Yeah. Trump he's fine. He's running for president. I don't know who's gonna be the next speaker. And as I said during the story, at this point, I don't even care. We'll cover it as we get updates, but that's just the reality of the situation. All right, Lucy Smith says, oh my God, I love Waz. Peter Hamby says, I was not expecting that. Manny 787 says, I know why you did the Newsom story in the main show, but would have loved to see it in the bonus show to see the rated R version of Anna. I appreciate that, but the video is gonna end up on YouTube as a video on demand. And so I didn't want to put our editors through the painful process of bleeping out all my F-bombs, but I hear you. All right, Twitch hype chat comments. We've got Dead Letter Omissions who subscribed at tier 1. Thank you for being a subscriber for 11 months. Thanks for always giving us the truth. My pleasure. I don't intend on stopping. And I'm gonna read a bunch of Twitch comments when we come back from the break in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and Wosny Lambre with you. Just want to read a few Twitch subs before we get to our next story. Mad as Jank is about to celebrate their 47th birthday on Friday. And what they want is for those who can to donate to TYT. I promise you this is a genuine comment by Mad as Jank. I'm not making it up to get donations, but I did want to read that. Octo Squiddies writes in our Twitch community and says, Homer Simpson is in charge of the safety department of the power plant. That is a good analogy and absolutely correct. Mr. Mintler says, solo Anna hour with Waz reacting in the background was everything I needed today. So I'm really loving that you're in studio.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right, you ready to talk about how people feel about Democrats and the economy?
Let's do it.
All right. The Biden camp keeps putting out videos bragging about Bidenomics and how helpful it's been for the American people, while denouncing MAGAnomics, which they have deemed pretty disastrous for ordinary Americans. And guess what? The campaign is not working. It is failing miserably, and that's not just according to me, that's according to a new poll that shows that the majority of Americans actually feel better about Republicans taking charge with the economy as opposed to Democrats. So let's get to the details of this poll, which was conducted by Gallup. They found that 53% of Americans believe the Republican Party will do a better job of keeping the country prosperous over the next few years, whereas only 39% choose the Democratic Party. So that 14-point difference is a disaster. It's the largest advantage that Republicans have had on this specific issue since 1991. And last month, Gallup released the results of a completely different poll, which asked Americans how they felt about the economy. Here's what it found. In September, 20% of US adults said economic conditions are excellent or good, while 32% call them only fair and 48% poor. The overall positive rating is down slightly from 23% in August, while the poor rating is up from 42%. And is the highest Gallup has seen in a year. So I just want to talk a little bit about why this is, because if you look at what Biden and his administration has actually accomplished, there are some significant wins there. Yeah. We've talked about his National Labor Relations Board and how they've been real fighters for workers, offering protections and making it easier for workplaces to unionize. We've talked a lot about the head of the FTC, Lina Khan, who's been doing an excellent job preventing some mergers and acquisitions from happening and holding some of these massive corporations accountable for their monopolistic practices. But that isn't really translating to economic wins for ordinary people. Why do you think that is, Waz?
I think it's several things, several pronged, right? One is that just sheer numbers wise, most of the gains of the quote unquote recovery have accrued to people who are already rich. So when you come out and tout the recovery and the gains made to people who aren't actually feeling them, it's hard to trust you on that. And then on the things that you're actually doing well, you can't come out and give a full-throated endorsement to, or you've been slow to. There was a tweet put out there of one of Obama's former staffers or aides or whatever this guy was, strategists, consultants, whatever. And he was just aghast at the idea that Joe Biden as president would show up and be united with the UAW the way that he was. He just found that to be unconscionable, that he would wade into that fight that way and be so directly on the side of the workers. I think he's got to do more and more of those kinds of things.
He does, yes.
The polling has shown that normal American people, when you ask, are you on the side of the executives of Ford, GM, and whoever the hell Chrysler's calling themselves now?
Stellantis.
It's Stellantis, and the actual people who make that thing go and make it run. Normal American people understand it's just the Democrats as an establishment collectively, and we've said this many times before, Anna, they can't take the position that they are directly against their overseers in the corporate class. And then thirdly, I honestly think is the economy's going bad for normal people. And the Dems are the party in charge.
No, that's
you
right,
gotta get the blame for it. That's just how it goes.
So I wanna elaborate on that further because you're touching on what I think is the main issue here. But I also wanna add, one of the other things that Biden did that I think is fantastic is he implemented a minimum 15% corporate tax. Now 15% is very low, but when you consider the fact that Trump rolled back corporate taxes from 35% to 21% without closing corporate tax loopholes, the effective tax rate ended up being negative, meaning that they would get like the most profitable companies in the country, including Amazon, would get like a tax refund when they would file the taxes. So Biden did something about that and ensured that there was a regulation in place ensuring that these corporations at a minimum pay a 15% tax rate. Now, to elaborate on what you mentioned in regard to how ordinary Americans or what ordinary Americans are experiencing with the economy, listen, we live in California, so I get that we pay a little more or a lot more in gas prices.
It's absurd.
We're in LA right now, it is hard to find a gas station that is selling gas for less than $6 a gallon.
Yep.
And so I know how gas prices actually work. I know that Joe Biden really has no control over that, and that it is the doing of the OPEC plus cartel, where it's all about the international market. It's all about, some of these countries that produce oil intentionally withholding production to limit the supply and drive up the prices of, the prices that we experience at the pump. Inflation is still pretty sticky and it's hurting Americans. These are the things that they see, these are the things they experience, and they're gonna blame the party in charge. It's just like how Trump at the tail end of his term was hurting because of the economy tanking due to coronavirus.
100%.
That wasn't his fault, but he was still blamed for it. Yeah, so I think that's what's really going on here.
Yeah, and I think another thing that Americans don't have a hard time understanding, they go out and try to buy a car. They go out and try to rent an apartment. They go out and try to buy a home. They see what the prices are.
The high interest rates?
The high interest rates relative to what they're still making, right? I saw something the other day where, some other douchey billionaire gets on in front of a camera and it's like, these people want a 40% raise. What in the hell? Like, that's inflation and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, guys, any average American would know that the price of cars have gone up and they know the workers aren't getting paid more. Like, it's not hard to understand these things. But again, I think Biden doesn't go out and stump for his actual victories. What he's doing with pharmaceutical companies for the first time ever, in the history of ever, this guy's gonna be able to negotiate with these clowns to lower prices for seniors.
That one's a little more complicated and I would not give him credit for that.
Well,
because a lot of those drugs, remember there's only 10 that they can negotiate on. A lot of those drugs are about to, their patents are about to expire and
the generics are about to come in anyway.
Yeah.
It might be a bait and switch. But again, even set aside the pharmaceutical situation, I don't think it's hard to say that Joe Biden has been the best president on economics in my lifetime.
No, I agree with you on that.
That's not even a
look, the worst
question.
The worst part about all
I'm 36, y'all.
The worst part about all of this is that Biden actually fulfilled some of the promises, economic promises for progressives, and I have no doubt that Senator Bernie Sanders is the one who pressured him behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't benefit Biden and the Democratic Party, they're going to point to these policies as the reason why they lost, or the reason why they're being punished by the electorate. That's what I'm worried about. But these are policy changes that have lasting benefits, right? The NLRB making it easier for workplaces to unionize, right? The FTC under the leadership of Lina Khan, who Biden chose for that role. The impact they're having in preventing monopolies will have lasting power, and we will see the benefits of that in years to come. But when it comes to the immediate impacts of high interest rates, inflation, high gas prices, all of that really provides a smokescreen to what some of the good things that Biden has done, I think, in reality.
Yeah, and again, he can't quite be as radical as I think some pretty moderate economists would say that he should be, as far as price fixing.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good solution.
I mean, to be honest, to smooth the pricing on gas to ordinary Americans, I think would work. But again, like the idea that you would smooth some of these increases that can be pretty jarring on the average person.
Totally.
And even, maybe you means test that thing to death, which is one of the favorite things of the Democrats to do. Again, that would be considered more radical, but I don't see how else these things get fixed outside of fundamental change in the way we organize our economy in general.
Totally. I mean, listen, the United States is the #1 oil and gas producer in the world.
Yeah, makes no sense.
We are also the #1 exporter of oil in the world. And that's relevant to know because while Republicans keep pointing fingers at Biden for not allowing us to be energy independent, fact of the matter is we have not nationalized energy in this country. We haven't nationalized oil and gas in this country It's owned by private entities who get to sell the fossil fuels to the highest bidder. And so that's part of the problem here. And the real solutions, especially if we're in the middle of an economic emergency that's impacting people at the gas pump. I mean, Biden could temporarily nationalize. He'd never do it. But there are political consequences to not taking bold actions that would help people at the gas pump. So we'll see how this all plays out. It is not looking well for Biden and the Democrats when it comes to the economy. And if you think Republicans would handle it better, just keep in mind that Donald Trump increased the deficit by another $2 trillion simply by offering and passing more tax cuts for the rich and corporations.
Yeah, I just don't see an argument for Republican policies, quite frankly, because they end up being more expensive because, again, when you cut taxes, you're cutting revenue, thereby adding to our debts. Like, it's not really, this isn't, like, I'm not even that great at math. Like, it's just obvious.
I mean, they like deregulation. I mean, look at the red states and how they, like Arkansas is a perfect example. Like, what have they done? They've loosened child labor laws to allow literal, like, 14-year-olds to work in environments that they have no business working in. So, look, look, people forget real quick what it was like to live under Republican leadership. They're gonna blame their problems on whoever is in charge at that moment, and right now it's Democrats. And if I were Biden, I don't know, maybe find someone in the Democratic Party who can go out and give aggressive speeches on your behalf, touting what you've accomplished. He's not doing a good job with it. It's not getting through to the American people, and they gotta try something different.
Yeah, and the last thing that I want to leave people with some level of hope and why I'm a bit more bullish on Biden and his economy and his policies is something that doesn't even have to do with Biden. It's those COVID checks, just generally speaking. This is was a radical policy move, something that was literally just unimaginable during just the Obama term, right? And the idea that they did something that radical just shows the possibilities that when there's will behind it, radical things, bold changes can happen very quickly. It's just a matter of managing the backlash that always inevitably comes from a capital class that is extremely organized, extremely united, and always on task and message.
And has the corporate media in its pocket, so.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, an out of control story involving a Pentagon official getting arrested for his involvement in a dogfighting ring. That and more coming up. Welcome back to the social break. Gaming CJ in our Twitch subs wanted to respond to the segment I did on Gavin Newsom by simply asking, will Newsom potentially die from old age during his term if elected? If that's what you got out of that segment, you've got issues. I'm usually as calm as can be with comments I disagree with, but that comment, pretty gross. I'm gonna move on. Archer Spade writes in and says, as someone who was on the phone with family the night the campfire blew through Santa Rosa, my blood is boiling. Maybe Gaming CJ doesn't live in California and doesn't know what it's like to lose his home and potentially family members as a result of, these utility companies that gain cover from people, trash politicians like Gavin Newsom. But PG&E, I should say, destroyed people's lives, and Gavin Newsom came in and protected them from any liability. But he's young.
He's
young. He's young. He's got great hair.
He's got sick
He's
hair.
not old. So who cares what he's done? Who cares?
He's got a sick vineyard in Napa Valley, I heard.
I've got no patience for anyone who tries to protect or provide cover for Gavin Newsom. None. I don't care about his age. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is what his leadership looks like. And his leadership is disgusting, craven, and evil. Let's move on. We've got, let's see, this is our member section. Special thanks to Jenko, who is a new member. Also, thank you to No More Pot for You, who's been a member for 2 years. At 42 months, actually, I'm honored. Love you all at TYT. Crystal writes in and says, but my torch is lit and my pitchfork is sharpened. I can't let them go to waste. It's funny. Bruce City Mike says, I knew someone who borrowed, I read that already. Sam Lanina says, capitalism functioning as designed and intended. CM says, Trump doesn't have the reading comprehension for a speakership. Kevin was a tool, but at least he could read and understand procedure. Also, it is kind of miraculous that he averted a government shutdown. I thought it was set in stone, it's gonna happen. But by the way, remember, it was a continuing resolution that he passed, which keeps the government funded until mid-November. Whoever the new speaker is gonna be, it doesn't really matter. There's gonna be a government shutdown. I'm gonna make the prediction right now, once that continuing resolution expires. All right, let's go to No More Pot for You. Thank you so much for the generous super chat. Frank Rockefeller says, a value is an integrated perception and a purpose. Politicians offer magic and free money. Bureaucrats offer indifference, national debt, and corruption. Frank also says, this next story I saved specifically for you, Waz, because I know you've got some strong feelings about Pentagon officials, especially those who work in intelligence.
Oh, God.
And man, do we have a doozy for you, so let's get into it. A Pentagon official has been charged with running a dogfighting ring and allegedly using jumper cables to execute animals that lost in the fights. So I'm gonna do my best to keep my composure during this story, but the details are horrific, and I want to also give the audience a warning about that. So the official is 62-year-old Frederick Douglass Moorefield Jr, who serves as, or I should say served as Deputy Chief Information Officer for Command, Control, and Communications for the Secretary of Defense's Chief Information Officer. There he is, that's the guy in question. Now, he's been charged for participating in the dogfighting ring in the DC area for more than 20 years, which honestly leads me to wonder, what is the vetting process, no pun intended, for Pentagon officials? How did this guy get hired when he's been part of this dogfighting ring for 20 years? So the ring regularly trained dogs for fights, ran thousands of dollars in bets on the outcomes, and executed dogs that didn't die during matches, and that's according to what the court documents state. Now, how was he discovered as someone who was involved in all of this? The investigation into Moorefield, who named his dogfighting business Jihad Kennels, an apparent homophone for jihad, began in 2018 when Arundel County Animal Control discovered the bodies of 2 dogs in plastic bags that included mail addressed to his Arnold, Maryland home, according to a recently sealed affidavit. The dogfighting ring that he ran was operating for several years, at least 2 decades, and thousands of dollars were spent on the violent dog matches. And there's quite a bit of evidence pointing to his involvement here. During a search of his home, an iPhone was found with some messages that incriminate him. We blurred out one of the images which shows a bloodied carpet because these dogs have been tortured, obviously. Along with the iPhone found in Moorefield's home, there was also a ton of very brutal evidence. According to the affidavit, the FBI discovered 5 pit bull type dogs kept in small, thick metal cages in a windowless room in the unfinished portion of his basement. The room holding the seized dogs contained items generally used to train dogs for fighting, including weighted collars and heavy metal chains. Investigators also found a device consisting of jumper cables attached to an electrical plug used to execute a dog after losing a fight. And the authorities have put out, photo evidence of the materials that were found in his home, including this one that you'll see. This was released by the US District Court for the District of Maryland. Anyway, I need to take a break from talking about the stories. How about you talk about it?
Yeah, I remember when Michael Vick first got found to be fighting the dogs, which, man, that was such a long time ago now, over 10 years, over a decade ago. Similar stuff, right? It's like a ring, a tournament, some sort of underground scene where people essentially gamble. And the idea being that this is, I think for people that were apologists for Mike Vick, me not being one of them, even and I'm not a dog person like you are, but like just the idea that you would do this as a recreational activity strikes me as backwards. Just this idea that this is their culture. That just doesn't pass muster with me. This seems like a business.
No, it isn't. I mean, it totally is. It's like an underground gambling business.
I think with people at the time, what they were trying to say in a more of a racialized sort of way is that this is how people from black people from certain parts of Virginia, this is their culture. The idea that you fight dogs for sport. Obviously that didn't pass muster with anybody.
No, I don't, by the way, I do not subscribe to that at all, like not even a little bit.
Yeah,
I didn't even know that was what,
Trust me, there was a lot of people that was kicking that. It's like, yo, this is where he's from. He's from the country in Virginia. This has been a recreational activity for hundreds of years for those people over there. And so like this idea that Mike Vick is some monster or criminal, yada, yada, yada. I think even Michael Vick, who's done a lot, honestly, to sort of rehab his image and have a better understanding as to why what he did was actually kind of heinous. I mean, I think Michael Vick, even to this day, could tell you like this is just inhumane behavior for anybody to be participating in, much less some Pentagon official or a multimillionaire athlete like Michael Vick was at the time. Obviously, there's laws on the books against this, and this dude should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But it's just incredible that somebody of this guy's stature and position in our damn government would be participating in this type of thing.
Right, like for me, again, I call into question how the Pentagon looks into the backgrounds and does a full background check into the individuals they decide to hire. Now, the Pentagon has confirmed that he is no longer working in this office, so he has been fired, thankfully. And now he's not only facing an investigation, he's facing prosecution for his involvement here. And to your point about like, I don't understand how a guy who's working in the Pentagon is involved in like a dogfighting ring for, again, like more than 2 decades. When you look at the Michael Vick story, at the time, if I'm not mistaken, and if I remember the story correctly, he was like the highest paid NFL player.
He was up there.
Yeah.
And some people, again, like when you think about some of the excuses they use, his cousin was actually running the ring. And Michael Vick he owned the house that they ran it out of and this, and so he was kind of financing it. It's not like it was happening underneath his nose.
Yeah.
It was something he was acutely aware of. His cousin got popped for another crime and snitched on him. And
Jesus.
And so that's why Michael Vick got entangled in that. And what I want to get back to with this Pentagon official and why I think we're so shocked, and I think I've shared this with you in the past, and I think a lot of the culture, the media that we get surrounding military, intelligence officials, crap like the Bourne Identity. Not to say crap, it's a great movie, but you get this image and this picture of CIA agent,
of these
intelligent,
professionals,
hyper competent individuals. In fact, elite individuals of intelligence, of physical strength.
They're a cut above everybody else. Right? Yeah.
It's this. That's what we get in the culture industries when we get portrayals of these people or books that are written about them. Quite frankly, like we get these people. They're getting dropped into the jungles, and then it's like, no, a lot of these cats are schlubs, just regular human beings with some of the same foibles that the rest of them, and maybe they don't deserve a lot of the benefit of the doubt that we foist onto them as our elites.
Now, if convicted, he, by the way, engaged in this with one of his longtime friends. And so if convicted, the two would face a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison, according to prosecutors. They are currently out of custody, but remain under supervision. So they were able to, post bail. And so we'll see how the case plays out, but it's just, look, I get that I'm biased because I own a dog. I don't even like to say own a dog. There is a dog in my family. I know that you think it's ridiculous because you're not a dog person.
No, I've come to understand.
We got to take it down because I'm going to start crying thinking about anyone doing anything like that to my dog, which would never happen because Charlie is not, a pit bull or a pit bull looking dog. Usually they use pit bulls to do this. But look, the reason why I bring it up is because when you have a dog in your family, you are very aware of just how intelligent they are and how aware they are of, just to give you an example, Charlie, obviously he's a dog, he can't read time. But whenever I'm doing the show from home, at around 5:15 local time, he's like, she's wrapping up and it's time for my walk. He starts rolling around on the bed. They're so intelligent and they're so cognizant of the environment around them and what's going on. Just thinking about those dogs being tortured, thinking about those dogs being, executed with freaking jumper cables.
Yeah.
It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, I think folks need to understand, we're not talking about, squashing an ant or a roach who dies instantly upon impact from the bottom of your shoe. These animals are going through extreme excruciating pain. Yep. And that's why we know what these guys are doing with this dogfighting and then the summarial execution of these people, of these dogs, is just, it's criminal. It's again inhumane.
Also, what a moron, right? I'm gonna dispose, God, it's so disgusting. Just when I read this detail, I started tearing up, but disposing of the dog's remains in a plastic bag, but also including your freaking mail in the plastic. You work for the Pentagon? What? You're so right. We need to.
It's propaganda. That's what I try to tell people.
It totally is.
When we get these portrayals of the military, they want us to think that these are just, you always hear when somebody is when a company is the Apple of such and such, right? They want us to think the military product that we produce is the Apple of military products. And that's how they're portrayed in media and in culture. And I think that's why we become so surprised when these people who we assume are part of just the smartest, most capable thing that's ever been produced in the history of America are doing something this stupid and quite frankly, disgusting.
Disgusting and cruel, definitely. All right, in our bonus episode today, there are some updates on Sam Bankman-Fried that I think you will find both entertaining and will appreciate. So we'll talk a little bit about how he gave a woman he was interested in engaging in a sexual relationship with the pros and cons of doing so. He might be a sociopath. I'm not. And he knows it. That's the funny part. So you don't want to miss that. That's for our members. You can become a member by going to tyt.com/join if you're watching us.
Tease, Anna.
It is, right? You can also become a member by clicking on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. And since we got a little more time left, wanted to read a comment from Robin Anderson Wood, who says, There are no bad dogs, only bad humans. As someone currently rehabilitating 2 dogs who were terrorized by humans for years, this story makes me quite literally sick to my stomach. I just can't. Robin, I love you, and we need more people like you in the world. So keep doing your thing. Thank you for giving me hope. I love that you're rehabilitating those puppies. And Joe B. Juan Kenobi says, Jim Jordan is the biggest brown stain on the great state of Ohio, and we've got some real stains. Appreciated that comment. Thank you for being a member. Everyone, move on over to our members only bonus episode. If you're not a member, I guess you're just gonna have to call it a night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Animals are innocent.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and